I believe it was in February of '09. I had gone to FranksDiner and got talking because of an item I saw on the menu, talking about all the different celebrities they'd hosted over the years, and one listing was the Three Stooges. I grew up a huge fan, and I asked the waiter, Mike Gordon, about it, and asked if there was anyone around that might remember their visit, and I was told the son of the original owner, DonFranks, served them in 1948, and Mike told me where I could find Don, and about a month ago I contacted Don, and he was kind enough to grant me an interview, and then Mike asked if I would allow him to record a re-interview, so Don was kind enough to say yes, and here we are. So, if you're ready.
I'm ready.
What year did your family first open the diner?
1926.
1926. And how old were you at that time?
I wasn't born. It was about five years before I was born. I was born in 1931.
Oh, wow. So the diner's been in your life your entire life.
Yes, I grew up in the diner.
Wow. And how long did your family own the diner?
Well, we sold the diner to the Chris and Lynn in 2000, I think it was.
2000.
2000.
So that's like 75 years
Yep.
family owned the diner.
My father had passed away, my sister had it, and then a friend of John Gilmore, a friend of mine, ran it, and then John and I sold it
Wow.
to the girls.
Do you know approximately what years the train car had been used on the railroad?
Oh, it was brought in on the railroad. It was brought in on wheels, and it came in on the Northwestern
Oh, wow.
Railroad. And they pulled it by horses and situated it there. There was apparently it had excavated for a basement. And they said it was quite an event. People were all over the place
Wow.
watching it come in.
And get set up.
Get it set up. And it was just the car at that time. It wasn't the dining room, which was affixed later.
Do you remember when that was added on, or were you too young?
1935, I would say. I don't remember it because I was too young. I was too young for that.
Sure. But the train car itself, was it from around late 1800s?
It was built by Jerry Mahoney in someplace out in New Jersey. And my father had seen an ad for it and
Purchased
corresponded with him and purchased it. It was, I think he paid $7,500 and 300 and some for the transportation.
Oh my gosh.
And the wheels were on it for many, many years, and they finally took the wheels off. I think they did it probably in 1935 when the dining room extension was put on.
Oh, wow. So it had its wheels up until that time.
Yes.
Then they added the bricks.
Yeah, then they added the bricks.
That's when that changed. Interesting. And were you a fan of the Three Stooges before they came in as customers?
Oh, yeah. I was in the era where they were the comedy trio.
I'm sure. Let's see. I was wondering if you were surprised to see them at the diner that day. Would you mind telling us the story?
I was surprised. I was working. It was very quiet. It was only about 3 o'clock, so the noon rush hour was over, and the evening dinner hour hadn't begun yet. And they came in and they sat separate, 2 seats between each one of them, so they could read their newspapers. And I kept watching them and eyeing them, and I thought, eventually they're going to say something funny. And I ended up by telling them no. I said, you guys aren't even funny. And they sort of looked at each other, and one of them gave me a pass to go backstage for the evening performance.
Oh my gosh, wow. And this was Mo, Larry, and Shemp who had come.
Yes.
Shemp was the one with
Shemp was the one that I was dealing with.
And was there anyone else in the diner at all at that time?
There were a couple of people. I don't think they recognized who they were.
I was going to ask.
They were downplaying it because they wanted to read the daily papers, and they were relaxing because I believe that they had an afternoon show and then they had an evening performance.
I see.
And this was sort of in between.
In between shows.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask if they gave any autographs, but it doesn't sound like.
No, I didn't have the sense to get autographs from them.
You got a backstage pass from them. How many
Yes,
people can say that?
yeah. No, it was a lot of fun because they really were funny, and it was interesting to see them go from a comic role to come backstage, and they were critical of themselves.
Really?
And they go right back out and smiling like nothing had happened.
But self-doubting.
Yeah, self-doubting.
Wow, that's
I believe that's probably true of a lot of actors and
any artist, probably.
artists. Yes,
So their show was at the Kenosha Theater,
right.
and you attended an evening performance.
Yes.
Did you watch the show from the wings, or did you get backstage after the performance?
No, I watched from the wings.
You did.
So I was there, and when they
Full time.
dash on and they dash off and they dash back on,
Oh.
and timing was crucial for them because their jokes and their comedy was dependent upon it.
Good timing, or it
Yes.
would have lost the effect. Sure. Wow, interesting. And when was Bela Lugosi at the diner?
Bela Lugosi came into the diner. He was at a performance at the Kenosha Theater also.
Really?
And my father had a friend at the Kenosha Theater, Artie, who ran the cameras or the projectors. And so he would often, they'd say, where can we get something to eat? Well, at that time, the diner was the only restaurant downtown that was open, and there weren't many other ones, period. My dad told me that it was just a little before midnight. There was somebody appeared at the door, and he slid the door open and said, "Good evening," and he was in full regalia as
Dracula.
Count Dracula.
Oh my gosh. About what year was this?
That I don't remember. I remember my dad coming home. He had a photo,
Oh.
and he had written on the photo to Frank, who makes the best oyster stew in the world.
Oh my gosh.
And unfortunately, the picture has been lost. But I
that's a cool
regretted
story.
not seeing him. I thought that was really tops.
That would have been something, yeah.
Yes,
To see Dracula in real
Dracula.
life.
My father said he looked just like him.
And he did.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And then Duke Ellington, when was he and his band?
Duke
there?
Ellington came here with his band, and I didn't wait on them either. I had left earlier because my sister and I had made an arrangement when she was off duty. She would come over to the theater and we were going to watch Duke Ellington and his orchestra.
Oh.
It was in the late 40s, I think.
Late 1940s.
And I called her and I said, "You better get over here. The show will begin soon." And she then informed me that she was waiting on Duke Ellington and his whole band. The dining room was
The
filled.
diner. So you obviously went back to the diner.
No, I waited for her to come over because it was getting too close to showtime.
Oh,
And so,
interesting.
unfortunately, I didn't see him personally. But
Oh, interesting. And then, do you know if these celebrities came to Kenosha by train?
I would guess that they probably did. The Duke Ellington and his band may have traveled by bus, which was rather routine in those days.
Bus. And what year did your family open Frank's Sandwiches?
About 1942, I would say.
1940.
It was called the Frank Sandwich Shop,
Frank's Sandwich Shop.
and it was on the corner of 6th and 58th.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask exactly where it was located.
Yeah,
Near
it
the
had
Schwartz building?
It is the Schwartz building, right? And it was previously had been a cigar store, Chet's.
okay.
And then my dad took over and they expanded it. And later it was after we closed it down after the war because it was a moneymaker. It was a cash cow.
Oh, the sandwich shop.
Yeah.
Oh, is this the same Chet's who owned the place that is now TG's?
No.
Different
it's-
Chet.
Yeah, different Chet.
Oh. And then how long did you own the sandwich shop for?
They closed it down. I mean, my parents and my sister and her husband decided to close it down after the war.
Oh,
45. They may have carried it out into 46. I don't remember that exactly.
approximately 5 years.
5, yeah. I would roughly. That's a good guess.
Oh, I remember the original meeting you said all the food was prepared at the diner and then transported to the sandwich
By a
shop.
little red wagon.
A little wagon up
They
the
covered
street.
all the food and they pulled it down the street.
Oh. And so you also knew about the Dayton brothers.
Cap Dayton and his brother. I don't remember his brother very well, but I remember Cap Dayton. He was very dapper. He wore very, I mean, in those days, white linen pants were the real in for a man.
Wow.
And
Dressed well and.
dressed well, and he strut up and down the street.
Oh, so they owned the hotel for how many years?
Well, they began it. It was the two brothers, and I believe that they both passed away maybe in the late 40s, early 50s.
And the family still had it before it was changed over to.
I don't know who had it. It continued to be a tavern, or I mean a hotel and cocktail lounge and restaurant for about 2 or 3 years after that. But then it was sold to someone else, and they have since had a new use for it.
I see. So before it became a care facility, it was
It was a regular. It was a very nice hotel, as a
a
matter of fact.
hotel. And then tell us the story about Gusty.
Oh, Gusty was a lady who was 14 years old when she worked for my father. It was before the dining room was attached, and she told me that her brother was allowed to sell magazines and newspapers in front of the diner. My dad had given them permission because she was the sole supporter of the whole family.
Oh.
And she got the job because my mother was in Germany and Gusty was too.
Oh.
So they spoke. But Gusty came back on her 90th birthday to celebrate, and her brother and all her children, everybody was there. Her husband had passed away. But it was a big event. It was pictures in this Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.
Really?
And then, in fact, there's one picture on the wall at the diner where she's greeting my sister as she came in the door.
Oh, there's a photo of her there.
Yes, it's in one of the frames in the dining room.
In the dining room. Oh, I'd love to see that. I'll have to ask. I wonder if the new people would know where that was.
You can't miss it. It's just when you go into the dining room, take a right, and before you get to the arch and go to the back room, it's right there. I would say it's about 3 or 4 feet from the back.
Okay, thank you. I'll definitely look for that when I go there next. What a nice thing to have. This was taken at the time of her 90th birthday celebration?
Yes, the day of the celebration. And Chris and Lynn really did a wonderful job.
Oh.
And it was very filled. I think it began like at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
How nice. That's so cool.
But it was very nice to see her. And she told me about how my mother would bring me in and I was just a baby.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Well, if she was a waitress there in around early 30s.
30, yes.
You would have been just a baby then.
Yes. My dad told me that my mother came right from the hospital to the diner so she could show me off.
Oh, so that's probably what impressed her, and she remembered that.
She remembered that.
No, her birthday party was about 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago.
I think it was like 7 years ago.
I see. Interesting. I think that's everything I had prepared, but anything else you'd be willing to share, we're all ears. You have such a fascinating history and interesting stories.
Well, it's very interesting to me today because of the girls have really Chris and Lynn marketed the place.
Oh.
And my sister just called me tonight, and there was a food magazine on, I don't know which one it is, but she said that they had mentioned FranksDiner in this. It's a national magazine.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, and FranksDiner gets a lot of play. At the time that they filmed us for the diner.
Food Network?
Yes,
the
for the
diners, drive-ins, and dives.
Dives, yes.
Yeah.
My sister and I were both filmed on that, and from that point on, it just took off.
How wonderful.
And it's a real center for people who are from out of town, and I have met many.
I know what you mean. The number of times I've been there, I'll end up sitting amongst people, and oftentimes they'll tell me that they're traveling through, but it was a place that they wanted to stop by and see.
Yes.
Yeah. That's wonderful. So, and then Lynn and Chris just sold it this
They
year?
sold it to Kevin and Julie, the young couple. They continued to work there.
Oh, Lynn and Chris are there?
Yes, they're still there. They only work 4 days. They work Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Wow.
Which are big days for the diner.
The heavier days.
Yeah, and it gets heavy. I was about a week ago or so. I noticed that they had, there was a book signing by a man from Illinois who had written a book and included the diner in that. And so there was a book signing, and they were lined up in both directions,
Oh, how wonderful.
east and west, and it was just packed.
How cool to see your family plays so many years later.
I have
so
that.
Popular.
That's a feeling, a good feeling that I have, because I think my father would be very proud of what the girls have done.
Oh, I'm sure. I can only imagine. Last November on my birthday, I was telling a friend of mine who lives in Chicago about FranksDiner, and he wanted to see it. And unfortunately, the only chance he got to come up to Kenosha was in the evening, and I knew that they would already be closed. And we were very surprised as we drove by. All the lights were on. They had a little party going, so
it was,
we opened the door and they let us in.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
How neat.
We had a small live band in there in the dining room, and I believe it was Lynn who was taking us around and pointing things out, because I told her I was bringing this friend to share the history that I had discovered, and she was showing us some photos in the back room. And
there's several family pictures in there too. When you enter the door, when you go into the dining room, just to your left, almost directly in front of you, is a blow-up of my dad's naturalization papers. Somebody got it, and it was in the archives at Parkside. And there are two photos of my dad as a cook above them. And interestingly enough, I didn't realize how old I was getting, but a woman came in one day and she said, "Is that your son?"
Oh my gosh, no, it was your father.
It was my father.
Oh my goodness. What was your family last name before you changed
it was changed before I was born. It was Frangiadis. My father was born in Smyrna, Turkey, of Greek parentage. And although my father was born and raised in Turkey and was schooled in Turkey, then he left when the Turks were really crushing it on the Armenians and the Greeks. So Greeks and Armenians don't have too many kind words about Turks.
Oh, sure.
But the name was Frangiadis, and it was too difficult for people to pronounce, so my dad changed it to Franks.
Franks. But your whole life, your name's been Franks.
For my whole life, it was, yes.
That makes sense. Wow, how fascinating. Was there anything else you would like to tell us?
Well, I can't think of anything else. There's a bundle of history at the diner. I was just telling Lynn and Chris that when you go downstairs, and there's what is the one room which goes into the back storage space, has a little window in the door. Now that used to be the girls' dressing room, when waitresses wore hats and long skirts and long uniforms. They would do that. But the little window was cut out, was a two-way mirror.
Oh.
And my dad had a bunch of friends from the Eagles Club who liked to play cards, and they would come down there and sit and play cards. Well, we had a buzzer in the front that if a policeman came in, you pressed the button, and they would check it out and see who was coming in through the two-way mirror.
Really?
Yeah, it was not a big gambling thing, but they were all afraid after the O'Mara scandal that just playing cards, they played for money, of course.
How interesting is that?
Yeah.
Well, just like having any liquor during Prohibition.
Yes, that's true. That's
very risky at one time, so.
I guess.
Well, that had to come in handy.
Yes.
Wow.
But now that basement portion is under the new, we call it the new kitchen, which was built to coincide with the opening of the sandwich shop.
I see.
Because it was much too small for anything else.
I see. Now, the grill was not out in where it's located today.
Everything in the dining car is exactly as it was before.
Oh.
In fact, where the coffee pots are now, they had two large urns, and we made coffee in urns.
Oh, I see.
And we used to have homemade pies, homemade cakes. My dad made lots of donuts.
Oh, my goodness.
Because on weekends they sold a lot of donuts, and people would buy them a dozen at a time.
Interesting. So the menu's changed a lot over the years.
Yes, it has. On one hand, it hasn't. To me, it hasn't really changed that much.
I remember something you mentioned in the first interview, which was so nice, that your father would keep. It was 24 hours.
24 hours except on Christmas Day.
And you would open it on the holiday up until noon, just
Till noon, so that the some of the retired men or single men that were in town, the bachelors, would have a place to eat. And my dad always cooked turkeys and whole Christmas dinner for them.
That's so nice.
Because they were the regulars, and he didn't want them to go without. Of course, we'd always wait for my dad to come home because Christmas dinner was going to be served.
Oh, sure.
He made it.
So he would close at noon and make it home.
Yeah.
For his own dinner. Now, where was your family home located?
Well, I was born, it was on 15th and 74th. And the last home that we owned was on 22nd and 48th, in the middle of the block, between 50th and 48th.
Oh, okay.
And I lived there until about 1973.
Oh.
And I sold it maybe about 1980. I had rented it out.
I see.
But I still go by there and think of good memories.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's so
I was
nice.
lucky I grew up in the neighborhood and they were all Italian. We were some of the only non-Italians in the neighborhood, but I learned as a result. And as a sideline to that, when I was in the service, we were in Germany. And that should have been very convenient for me because I spoke and understood German.
Oh, sure.
But it wasn't the home feeling wasn't until we crossed over into Italy.
Really?
And I heard the girls talking. They were bringing out wine to the cars.
Oh,
So,
wow.
I felt like I was home.
They reminded you of your neighbors.
Yes, I mean, I grew up in the neighborhood like that. You learned a great deal of the Italian because that's what was spoken.
My father said there used to be a third German, a third Polish, and a third Italian in Kenosha.
Oh, yes.
That Kenosha was about in thirds.
Yes, that's right. It was divided.
Interesting.
The area, well, the churches used to all have, Holy Rosary was the Italian church, Mount Carmel was Italian, St. James was the Third Avenue crowd. They were more elite.
Oh, St. James.
Yes.
Okay.
And St. George was the German, and then St. Kazimierz was Polish.
It's interesting because even growing up, a lot of my friends who happen to be Polish went to St. Kazimierz.
Yes,
and
St.
I knew
Kazimierz.
some friends who were German. They belonged to St. George. Now it's St. Elizabeth, I think.
There's a lady that lives here who her father had a bakery called the Mocha Bakery, and it was, I remember it as I was about 10, 12 years old. But at night they would bake, and it was wood-fired ovens, and you could
Really?
smell the Lithuanian bread that they made.
That sounds good.
Oh, it was wonderful.
Wow. And where was that located?
On 53rd and 24th,
53rd and 24th?
behind Spanky's.
Okay. I can picture that general area there.
Yeah.
I think Cardinelli's is
Cardinelli's is, yes, Cardinelli was the old Italian baker.
Right.
And you could smell their sweet rolls at night, and you could smell the Lithuanian rye breads.
Rye breads. Wow. So did you work anywhere else as a teenager, or were you in the diner?
I was trapped in the diner.
Trapped.
As a matter of fact, I was there even through my college days. I would come home, and my father would say, I know you just got home, I need you.
Oh.
So I'd go down, and I would work pretty consistently until the day I left, and he'd say, you can leave at noon.
Oh.
So I was there. I grew up in the diner.
Grew up there. Wow, that's fascinating. Just to have that kind of an anchor and still here and doing so well and so popular and of interest to so many people still, that's got to be very
I
cool.
remember the old days when, during the Second World War, the downtown was just packed with people, and a lot of sailors from Great Lakes. As a matter of fact, my father often gave sailors, he'd find a bunch, not a bunch, but 3 or 4 that had drank too much.
Oh.
And he'd put them in the dressing room downstairs and let them sleep until he was
nice.
free, and then he would drive down to Waukegan or North Chicago with them.
And he'd bring them home.
He would bring them back.
Oh, he sounds like a very kind man. I mean, like
He
had
was.
a lot of
He was.
thoughtful gestures.
He was a very gentle man.
Oh, that's so nice. I know my dad used to say he felt badly that I would never grow up knowing Kenosha the way he did in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, see, that was the time.
Yeah, thriving downtown area, a lot of businesses, department stores, the
Oh,
theaters.
there would be, streets would be crowded all the time.
Oh.
And I remember things, today the things are shipped in frozen or by large amounts of food brought in. But there was a day when every Saturday night, Mr. Dembski, a little old Jewish merchant from Racine, would bring in vegetables.
Oh,
And
fresh.
fresh vegetables.
Oh,
And he
my
had
God.
wonderful vegetables. Another farmer came in from West Kenosha with melons, cantaloupe. And then the egg lady came from just on the other side of 94.
Oh,
She had a farm, but she came twice a week.
wow. Fresh
For-
food.
Fresh, it was all fresh, yeah.
Thing of the past, I'm afraid.
Yes, it is.
That's terrible. I love the Lemon Street Art Gallery on Sheridan Road, and that's got quite a interesting history too. I was told it was a liquor store.
It was liquor.
Ice cream parlor.
Yes.
Barber shop or something.
I don't remember the barber shop, but I remember the liquor for sure.
The Beer Depot, I think it was
Yes,
called.
it was called the Beer Depot.
I was going to ask, like, about what year, what was the first business that was in there?
I don't remember what the first one, but it was, I think it may have been, I don't remember when I was a kid. When I was going to Washington Middle School, that was a pretty active place. I think it may have been the beginning of the liquor store.
Oh, back like in the 40s,
Yes.
1940s. They do have some photos, I think one by the door that I remember, like then and now.
Oh.
I think it was a Beer Depot in the photo, and then they had a more current picture of the place after it turned into an art gallery. But how interesting. What else was I going to ask you? I think, were a lot of places open 24 hours downtown years ago? Or was that kind of an uncommon thing for your diner to be open around the clock?
It was around the clock because I can't remember any place else that was open. The bars were open until 1 o'clock in those days.
I see.
And 1 o'clock was the big rush hour at the diner.
Uh-huh.
You had noon breakfast, you had noon lunches, you had dinners at 5. And there was constantly cooking going on because they had to replenish the supplies that were used for the one before.
Wow. Do you remember in the 30s or 40s what was in what is now the boathouse?
I don't. I
Okay.
don't remember that.
That ceiling in there looks original, and I think it's late 1800s. It's beautiful,
Oh,
and I've always
yeah, I
wondered what...
don't remember. I remember the when you go from on 6th Avenue, there used to be a bridge. You went across the bridge to go to the other side, and the other side of the bridge sort of ended where Common Grounds is now.
Oh,
And on the harbor there was a very large factory, Simmons,
okay.
which later became AMC, and
Now
then
it's Harbor Park?
yeah, it's now Harbor Park. And there was also Wisconsin Electric generators there,
Oh,
and they buzzed all night long.
oh. This is never quiet.
No,
Even when American Motors was in, I remember. No
That
matter what
was
time
on.
of day or night, if you drove by, there was a lot of noise and all lit up.
Yep.
3 shifts. That explains something, what you just said about a bridge in that area, because I've seen some aerial photos in history, like
Yeah.
local history.
and the
postcards.
bridge, and the water used to run behind.
I couldn't picture that. Well, that explains it because the bridge no longer is.
The bridge is no longer there. I think the original bridge, which crossed the waters there, the Pike River, was then moved to 50th Street, connecting to the Washington Island, or now referred to it, Simmons Island.
Oh, I see. So it used to be called Washington Island.
It was Washington Island, and Mr. Simmons lived on the island.
Oh,
So, and then there was it was a Veenstra Lumber and Supply, where the current municipal building is, and there was also hides. They dealt with hides, and they would be brought in by barges and floated under the bridge, and they unloaded on the other side. Well, there was a spectacular fire sometime in the early 40s.
a tannery.
Yes, it was a tannery.
That's one of the locations that was in one of the photos.
In one
near
of the
that old bridge. I saw that sign. And
Yeah, they come in off of Lake Michigan into the harbor area, sail down, and load and unload.
I see.
And then there was a huge fire there.
And Bodie Brothers?
Bodie Brothers was located on 55th, I think.
Okay.
55th and 6th Avenue. That was another big fire.
That's what made me think of that. I thought I remembered hearing that. Bodie Brothers.
There was also a big fire when Leppin Company, a woman's store in Furrier,
Oh, no.
that burned. And the corner of 58th and 6th Avenue on the southeast corner, there's a building which was Block Brothers Clothing. And it was originally a wooden structure. My sister remembers it, I don't.
Oh.
But it burned on a New Year's Eve.
Oh, no.
And my father had to feed coffee to the firemen. They couldn't blanket the fire,
Oh, my goodness.
but it worked out okay.
Wow. And then you shared a really interesting piece of history in the city history the first time we spoke, and it was about why there's no death penalty in Wisconsin.
Oh yes, there is no death penalty because the original capital punishment went to a man who had killed his wife, and it was down on 14th Avenue, just maybe 14th, just off of 60th. The house is still there. He killed her and threw her in the well, and then they hung him. It was the only capital punishment in the state of Wisconsin because after that the legislature decided that it was so much of a show and so much of a circus because people came and sold things and they brought children and everything, and he was hung at the north end of Lincoln Park.
Wow.
So.
And that was in what year?
Well, that had to be in the 1800, maybe 1850, 1860.
Wow.
But I'm real proud of the fact that we don't have capital punishment.
That's very interesting.
It isn't a deterrent at all.
Right.
People still continue to kill, even when you have that.
Oh, right. There's really no reason to have it because you're right. People still.
They still go.
Right. Yeah. That's fascinating. Who was the mayor when you were growing up here? Say 1930s, 1940s.
I forgot. There was a city manager. There was a mayor, and then they switched back and forth between city managers and everything. The chief of police, I remember.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Chief Sullivan. Chief Sullivan used to come into the diner.
Really?
And the man who ran the O'Mara ran what is referred to as the Hole now. That was a gambling spot at one time. And
in the Schwartz building?
Yeah, and Ollie O'Mara, the man who ran it, would always have lunch with the chief at the back table.
Wow.
And you can draw your own conclusions about that. But his family, Mr. O'Mara's family, still continues. His grandson operates the Bartley House. Yeah.
Really?
Bartley.
So that's the family that owns the Bartley House.
Yeah, Bartley Jr.
Oh my gosh.
Bartley Sr. was his son, and he started it, and he also ran a bar across the street from where the diner is, called the Irish Pub.
Interesting. Now that's gone?
That's gone too.
Because all I can picture is a parking lot.
There was
an alley.
On the alley there was an auto mechanic, Dolan's Garage it was called. Next to it, going east, was a Tom George's barber shop. And then there was a 2-story Academy Lanes bowling, wooden structure, and they used pin boys at that time. And then there was
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. So all of these places were right on that block across from the diner.
From the diner.
Interesting. Well, if I don't want to keep you if it's going long. I thank you so much for all your information.
I appreciate your interest, and you're very kind.
Absolutely. You've been very kind to grant us the interview and the re-interviewing.
I had a couple of questions I wanted to go, if that's okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry to break your continuity, but you were finishing.
Yeah.
First of all, looking straight into that camera, DonFranks, when was the garbage plate developed and who came up with it?
Okay, the garbage plate for which the diner is now famous was created by a young man of Hispanic background, Julio Perez. And it was during the time that John Gilmore ran the place. And Julio made it for some friends, Mexican friends of his. And it sort of caught on because people would say, "Oh, what's that?" And today it is the big thing. People come to the diner and they'll say,
Where does Julio work now?
Julio works at the Coffee Pot. I saw him yesterday.
Which end the coffee pot is?
The Coffee Pot on 7th Avenue. And Julie, a woman who worked for us at the diner at the same time as Julio did, they were going to buy the diner and they couldn't get the financing. So she went with another friend of hers over to the Coffee Pot. And Julio's been working there ever since.
Wow.
I have a couple more questions. I'm real sorry, Don, but you've really piqued my interest in this. Now, that dressing room with the two-way mirror, was that on the diner floor or was that in the basement?
It's in the basement. You go down the stairs.
It's right next to the women's bathroom, that
Right.
window, right?
That's right.
Okay, so they would gamble down in there?
They would gamble and see that when you went through, if you go through that door to go into where all this food storage is and all refrigerator, that was open in the food storage. And they had somebody in town had developed his films in there. And then there also a big card table, and my dad's friends from the Eagles used to play and gamble there.
Is there any truth to the rumor that there was a tunnel that ran from the diner somewhere else?
I've heard that, but I don't know of any. I think I would have known if it were true.
Okay. If you were to look at the people who go to the diner now, how would you typify them? What kinds of people go to the diner now?
Well, the regulars, it's hard to define the regulars. I still am a regular, but they have a great deal of tourists who come there because, as you say, they're looking for a different place. Years ago, the diner was a spot for all of the merchants downtown. There were many, they were Jewish merchants who had Korfs, they had Kalebs, they had Stearns, they had all, and they would all come into the diner to eat lunch. And about 3 tables full of them. And my dad always had a little radio which he could bring out. And they came in after the rush was over so they could listen to the baseball game.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Was the diner 24 hours from when your dad opened it?
Yes.
On? When did it go down from 24 hours? Was it when you and John got it or when your sister got it?
My sister, at the end of her term of it, she and her partner, Moose, they went to 2 o'clock in the morning, so they cut that 1 hour rush, and then they just decided to go back. And I'm not sure. I think John Gilmore went to the hours that they currently have, and the girls have continued that.
Who was Moose? Was that her boyfriend or just her
No,
business partner?
Moose was a friend of my sister and her husband. Moose was a detective in Kenosha. Gordon Elson was his name. Nice man, nice man. And he and my sister and her husband jointly owned it. My father sold to them. And so my sister was in there and she continued after both of Moose and my brother-in-law passed away. And then she passed it on to me by will.
Wow.
So you had morning between, say, 2 and 6, which would be rather dead. You might get a couple of people stopping by or something. I'm guessing?
Between 2 and 6 in the morning?
Yeah, when it was 24 hours.
You could always find, I'd say more than that, 10 people in there.
Wow.
Because the people who worked a third shift or would either come in there before they were going to work, people getting out, there were always people in there. In fact, we had a fellow that lived here that was a cab driver, and he said that my dad always had a cup of coffee waiting for him when he came in, and he'd sit there and they'd say, "Frank, call me a cab." My dad said, "There he is right there."
Now, your typified people who are there now are kind of like, you've got your group of regulars, you've got your group of tourists. Is it correct to say that as the diner's fame grew through television and media hits, that you lost some of the regulars because it was so darn busy?
Well,
I'm not trying to damn
yeah,
you, I'm just saying,
I'm trying
get a
to
picture of
think.
how it worked.
We had several attorneys and people like that who worked downtown and had legal offices and things like that. And they had sort of, the real business is on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. And so that didn't crowd them out. But then you still have a lot of people who come in as tourists.
Now, when you were a kid and you waited tables there, say like when you were 16 and the Stooges came in, you said you had 2 big urns of coffee there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those are those big
huge
things
ones, right?
with the spout thing.
Yep.
That you'd be lucky to find these days.
Yes, I don't know whatever happened to the 2 that we had.
Okay.
Oh.
What kind of people came in then? Now, you said you had your merchants and that.
The merchants came in. The longshoremen that worked in the docks, they all ate there. Simmons workers, they had a half an hour in the evening and half an hour for lunch, and they would actually come over from the Simmons plant, run over to the diner. My dad had full dinners at that time. They would eat, and they seemed to work in shifts. And then, of course, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it started all over again. Those same people. So it was a pretty busy thing.
Okay. Now, that middle room, you know where the dining room, the middle room now?
Yes.
Okay. What was that used for?
That was the original kitchen. That was the original
the baking
kitchen.
and oven and stuff.
In the
Yeah.
back.
It was the dishwasher. The dishwasher had 2 tubs back there. There was a stove or a range. And then they had chopping tables where you chopped things and did everything. My father, he would buy the meat, and he always carved his own off of that. If he was making stew, he had to cut it off the bone himself.
Wow.
So
And this was in the back room.
this was at the room which is now the back dining room.
I see.
And did the far back room, that didn't exist at that point?
No, that came into being when they had the sandwich shop, because they needed the additional space.
But there was always a grill out in the front area?
That grill it's not the same grill, it's been replaced. But the fan which is over the grill is still the same fan.
Really?
The same cover over the grill.
The hood was custom made, I've heard?
Yes, it was.
And that's nickel or something.
It's what they call German nickel.
Oh my goodness.
Now, the sandwich shop operated from what years again? You said it was current with World War II.
For about 42 until about 46.
Okay. And then they gave it up. Why again? Because you said it was a cash cow, and I was a little confused.
Well, the business dropped off. The war was over. People were not. You didn't have these droves of people working, and the downtown was not the same. And the military supplied a lot of people downtown to Kenosha. From the naval base, there were a lot of people coming in for that, and that was always busy.
Okay. So,
Have you seen a picture of that?
no.
Frank's sandwich shop?
Yeah, the sandwich shop. I have a picture. I have to dig it out. I'm not sure exactly where it is, but I'll let you see it.
Oh, how wonderful.
Okay.
And the Three Stooges shot pool at the hole in the Schwartz building
Yes,
you mentioned the last time too.
They were down there, and that was the hole. But behind the hole were 2 doors, and if you were lucky enough to be admitted by the fellow who ran the soda fountain in the hole, he pressed the button and you went in, and then somebody looked out and see it was you, and they'd say, "Frankie's kid is here."
Oh.
And then they would let me in. And Mr. O'Mara, when he would call my dad and say, "Get us crackers came in a box about this big," and they would fill it with sandwiches. And if I was lucky, I got to carry it because Mr. O'Mara always gave me a $1 tip.
Oh, nice.
That was
And
big.
in the 40s, that was big.
That was very big.
When you got
I'm
into,
sure.
I'm sorry. When you got into the sneaky back room, what kind of accoutrements were there? What?
Oh, in the
was that
back,
gambling then, or
it
what?
was horse racing. Well, there was also craps tables and
Wow.
billiard tables, and then 3 walls were the postings for the racetracks. And it was all done by wire. They would get the information on the 3rd floor of the Schwartz building. They would get it downstairs. And that's how it all sort of ended, because 2 of the Amer brothers, John and Bob, were trying to second guess their brother Ollie, who ran the thing, and it blew up.
Oh.
So that came. And then the day that the whole thing collapsed was when they had the Kiefhofer investigation and regarding gambling. And I remember my mother calling my father and said, they just mentioned FranksDiner at the Washington congressional hearings because they wanted to know where the chief of police was paid off.
Oh, not the publicity you wanted.
No,
right?
not the kind of publicity. But that day, the presses for the Kenosha News, they did not print the Kenosha News. The city manager, I forgot what his name is, he left town, the sheriff disappeared, and Ollie disappeared for years.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Everybody fled.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So Kenosha has a very interesting unwritten history. Is
Yes,
kind
they
of what I'm hearing.
do. Those of us who remember it. It's the only I don't think anybody's got a written history.
Wow, fascinating. One last Stooge question.
Oh, go ahead.
You said you shook hands with them at the show. Was it each of them or just
Yeah, I think it was each of them.
you shook all of their
Yeah, and they were in a, they were glad the show was over, and that was it. So
Oh, wow. Interesting.
it was very interesting. I felt like it was a king backstage.
Oh, I'm sure.
They told me you have to get back, don't stand too close so that you could see from the main floor. But they would come out and do a stint, and then they come running back, and their timing was everything. So I just was standing. I stood there in awe
So they were running back and forth during their show.
during the show.
And you were back there and
I was watching.
all of this.
So the Dayton Hotel at that time, would it be fair to have called that a luxury hotel?
It was. It was.
Okay, so it was full service. You had bellhops. You had
Everything.
the whole 40s trip.
Yeah, they had a very good little coffee shop downstairs which served lunch and coffee, and
You mentioned a beautiful cocktail lounge. Until
yes, in the
1950.
back room there.
Chandeliers.
Everything was very good. I know I worked for a man by the name of Nick Demas who had Kenosha Auto Transport, and I worked for him. And I know that he used to meet Jimmy Hoffa when Jimmy Hoffa, who was the head of the Teamsters, they always had their meeting at the Dayton Hotel. And I happen to know that because I was working for Mr. Demas.
Isn't
It
that
wasn't
something?
well publicized.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Wow. Well, I was looking through microfiche at Simmons Library maybe 10, 15 years ago now, and I think it was my grandparents' wedding announcement I was looking up, and I saw an ad for the Dayton Hotel at that time, and it looked beautiful.
Oh, it was very, very
pretty.
nice.
Yeah.
It was a very classy place. They had many, not many, but I guess they did have several people that had used it as residence.
Oh, that just lived there.
There was an older couple. He was a real estate and insurance man. The Matsons, they lived there. Several of Ollie's boys from the gambling thing, they lived there.
And the Alice Apartments I found interesting. I was just walking past there a few days ago, and I noticed the year on it.
Oh,
I
yes.
think 1915.
Yeah, that's quite old.
And I didn't know apartment buildings were the thing back then. I
Well,
thought,
these apartments are spectacular. If you've never been in them, try to get in them sometime. Because my sister lived on one fronting Library Park. She had a perfect view.
I remembered you saying that.
And they were just great.
Wow. A lot of older buildings that are now apartments were single-family homes.
Single
years ago.
families, and right.
It appears that was always an apartment building.
That was built as an apartment building.
Interesting. Wow.
And people didn't move in and then move out right away.
They probably stayed there
They
for...
stayed there until somebody passed away or something.
Wow. Interesting. Fascinating, really. So much. I heard Al Capone ate at a supper club on Sheridan Road. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know about that, but I've heard the rumors that he did.
South Sheridan Road near the state line.
Yes.
It's an old supper club on the east side of Sheridan Road.
Well, there might have been Radigan's.
Oh.
Because Mr. Radigan had originally started out with a little roadhouse on the east side of Sheridan Road, almost across the street from where the Radigans is located now. And they had gambling in there those days. Slot machines were a big thing. That's how Mr. Radigan made most of his money originally.
Oh, wow. So that might have been where he...
It was a little green building. I remember going out there. I don't recall that I ever went in, but my dad would go in because he was a friend of Mr. Radigan's.
Interesting.
And we would go for a ride. And that was pretty far out in the country because there was nothing built along Sheridan Road.
Oh, sure. I can imagine back then, right?
Yes, it was. It was a long time ago.
30s and the 40s, yeah.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything out there. A couple of the older homes, maybe. I rented the upstairs of an old farmhouse in the 90s for 3 years and learned that it had been added on to a few times since it was originally built. But in the 1920s, the landlord told me he found out that the property it was on was a tomato farm for Campbell's Soup.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Was that on Q?
Yeah, just south of there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, south of that was the big tomato field.
Really? So
I
you remember the
remember-
tomato farm?
Yeah. I remember that very well, the
Wow.
tomatoes.
Wow. Yeah, it was a White House just south of 104th, which is Q.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's the place.
Interesting. Wow.
I do have one last question.
Okay, one more.
Okay, no, one last, and then I'm gonna leave it alone. You've been with the diner for a real long run.
Yes.
Any particular favorite memory?
Oh.
Anything you miss?
I think I miss the old days when, during the war days, and when it was a constant turnover of people. Everybody was very nice. My dad had 3 shifts of waitresses in those days. That's why they had the dressing room. And
24 hours.
24 hours, and they had uniforms, white uniforms with pretty long skirts on them, and headbands and aprons, and there was a lot of activity. And I was really just, I was just becoming my, a juvenile. But those are memorable days.
When it was just
When
busy running around the clock. and
Yeah, everything.
People coming and going. At
People
all hours of the day.
yes, we would go to the theater. My mother and my sister and I would walk downtown from 15th and 74th, walk downtown, go to the diner and have some lunch, and then go to a movie. And then in those days, they had double features because they had a main picture and then the not so good picture.
Yeah.
And the theaters were so filled. In the evening performances, they would just be packed outside, waiting to get in.
In the display window over at the Kenosha Theater, there's a photo. I guess Life magazine had done an article on the Kenosha Theater in the 30s, and the current owner, the night I interviewed you, on my way home, I stopped to take some photos of that. He came out, and it was the first time I ever spoke to anyone involved in the renovation project or anything, and he said he was always sad when he purchased that building in 1983 that there weren't more photos taken of the interior
At the time.
in the 30s and 40s, and then recently discovered on Life magazine's website there's an archive photo section with loads of photos of the interior
Oh,
of the
really?
Kenosha Theater, and I couldn't believe the crowds and how they were like 4 people deep in width all the way around the block trying to get into this
Yeah, and
theater to see whatever the shows.
and the movie
there.
theaters were like about 20 cents for an adult and
Oh,
a dime for a
wow.
kid.
Unbelievable.
I was amazed when I went up to Tinseltown not too long ago looking at the candy counter, and the prices on the candy bar, which are smaller than the ones we got for 5 cents.
No, they're several dollars each.
So, and a box of popcorn is just
Ridiculous.
10 cents was a lot of money for a box of popcorn then.
To go to the show,
Is
it's about $50 for 2 people anymore.
Yes, I don't know how you can do it.
No, it's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, so if you're interested in looking those up, Life magazine website.
My favorite theater was the Gateway, which is now the Rhodey Opera House.
So it went from the Gateway to the lake and then the Rhodey?
It was originally the Rhodey Opera House, then it went to the Gateway, then it went to
Lake?
the lake, and then now it's the Rhodey Opera House again. But that theater inside was spectacular. The
That's my
entrance,
favorite too. The lobby, the
The
women's
lobby.
lounge, everything is just beautiful. And all original, I think.
yeah, That was my favorite place.
I
That was
have
the
to
first place where I saw them selling popcorn and candy in the theaters, because before that
Oh.
they didn't have concessions that I remembered.
Oh, really? The Roadie was the
The-
first gateway
yeah,
when you
the
grew up.
gateway.
When did it first open as the Roadie originally? Do you know?
That I don't know. Probably,
Before your time?
yeah, probably it may have been in the 20s sometime.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. That is a pretty one, and I just went there in '05. That's 6 years ago already, but Peter Tork was doing a benefit performance there
Oh,
from the Monkees.
yes.
Was that when he stopped into Frank's? Because I noticed that on the menu too. They just refer to him as a rude member of the Monkees.
Oh, I haven't read that. I have to read that.
Yeah. And, well, at that show, I was surprised to see that everything was like I remembered it in the 70s. Everything was, left as is. So it was a pretty theater.
Yes, it was a beautiful theater. The Orpheum Theater was a second run because the movies would play at the Kenosha or the Gateway. And then second time around in the city would go over to the Orpheum. So that was the second run. But then, of course, those were 3 downtown, and then they had the Vogue on 52nd Street, the Lincoln on 14th Avenue, the Roosevelt on Roosevelt Road.
Oh, the Lincoln Theater. Where was that on 14th?
It's now, I believe, it's some sort of religious group.
14th between 60th and 75th Street.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
I'll
It's
have to drive through.
closer. Yeah, it's on the east side of the road, and the entrance is sort of like an arch there. And that was the Lincoln Theater.
Wow.
That's the first time I went to a theater. My mother took me to see something.
Oh, the Lincoln Theater was the first.
The Lincoln.
Was the Roosevelt Theater around in the 30s?
Yes.
That was too.
The Vogue Theater, where the Italians all went to the Vogue Theater. They used to have Italian films with subtitles for those of us who were not
Really?
that
Wow.
conversant. Yeah.
Interesting. Actually, I learned my great aunt met Don Amici there.
Oh,
that
yeah.
would make sense. They were
That
both
would make sense.
Italian.
Yes,
No.
his Don Amici's family, I don't know, it was an aunt or uncle or cousins or something, lived not too far away from us, and I remember.
Wow.
Uh,
I think that was 1934 when she met him there.
oh, yeah, that was before before
You
I
were
have
little.
remembrances.
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting. I think so. Roosevelt they tore down. I was sad. I hope they can renovate the Kenosha Theater.
Yeah, that's a big project, and the money-wise, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess Universal Studios used to own that. I found that out from.
Oh, is that
the man who
true?
Owns it now, and Warner Brothers owned it for a time. Switched hands. I guess
They
they
switched.
said the studios used to own the
It
theater.
was like a Spanish palace inside. The
That's-
ceiling looked like sparkly. I mean, they had lights up there that looked like stars.
The sky would twinkle. somebody
Yes, the
said.
sky would twinkle, and it was at that time, that was a big thing to have theaters built like Spanish
Palace.
palaces.
Wow. I actually got a tour of the Kenosha Theater a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and it was just amazing. I've seen that building for all these years. I never thought I'd get in, but after I met the owner, I asked how I would ever get a tour. He says, "Well, we have a big cleanup project coming up on the 20th."
Yeah,
Why don't
he
you come
depends
by?"
upon volunteers. That's what
Oh,
he does.
where were you in the wings when you're looking at the stage? Were you on the right
I was
side or left side?
I was on what is called stage right, which is your left side.
Facing the stage, it's on the left.
Yes,
Oh my gosh.
facing out.
So when
And-
you're on the stage looking out, you're at the right.
Right.
I see. So stage left and right is for the person on the
Just
stage.
yeah, it's the person on the stage.
You were stage right. That's very interesting. Yeah, he showed me the little dressing room area and the stage. No seats anymore.
Well, that's a shame.
Just concrete steps all the way up. Comparing it to the date, and it looks like it's approximately 7 stories.
It was very tall.
Yeah, it was pretty big.
It was very tall. And when they had celluloid film, every once in a while the film would break and they'd have to get it spliced together real fast.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that happened. Well, the film would be reused and reused and reused.
Wow, interesting. Do you ever remember someone jumping off the balcony at one of the theaters yelling
I do.
Shazam?
That was at the Vogue.
My dad, well, they grew up at the same time, and he always told us that story.
Bennie Boom Boom was his name.
Cavelli?
Yep. Bennie Boom Boom Cavelli. He was up in there and they convinced him to yell Shazam and fly.
Right off the
And
balcony.
he went right off the balcony.
Can you believe that? And he wasn't hurt or anything.
No.
How
Bennie
old
Boom.
was he?
Oh my gosh, I can't remember that. I'm surprised you know that story. Bennie Boom Boom.
My dad told me that. Oh my gosh, wow.
That's a long time
It's
ago.
amazing he wasn't seriously injured or killed.
I know.
I'm assuming he was grade school age when he did this. I would think any older he'd know better.
Yeah, I think it was before he was in junior high, so
Oh my
he would have been in grade school.
Nice friends.
Yeah, to
him do this.
convince him.
Gee. Oh my gosh. How funny. I was wondering, that popped in my head. I'm like, I wonder if that had to be the talk of, you know.
It was. Nobody could believe it. Nobody could believe that Bennie Boom Boom was so dumb to follow the instructions. They said, just stand up there, yell Shazam, and fly. And he did, straight down.
Did he land on people or something?
He must have landed on people. I wasn't there when it happened, but I have
Oh
a
my
couple of
gosh.
friends who were there. They were instrumental in getting him to, convincing him that he could fly.
To jump. Wow. Oh my gosh.
A
Oh, thank
long
God he
time.
was all right. Oh, jeez. Wow.
You have anything else?
You got me.
Okay.
I can't thank you enough. This has been so wonderful. So nice of you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it too. Okay.